sending arms and military personnel to Ukraine. And so that's an important part of the work that we will have to come back to. And we will be discussing at a trade union conference early in 2024. I'm not sure if we've settled on a date yet, but it will be January or February 2024. And if you're on our trade union network mailing list, we'll give you more details about that. So there's an important moment in terms of international policy that we're working on. But the purpose of today's meeting is really a practical organizing meeting around how we're building for Palestine solidarity with the Palestinian people in our trade unions, how we can mobilize more trade union members to be part of the demonstrations, to be part of the mass movement that we're building. And in particular, our next day of Trade Union Day of Action in workplaces, which is next Wednesday, the 29th, the 29th of November, and our next national demonstration, which is this Saturday, 25th of November. We're assembling in Hyde Park, in Park Lane, alongside Hyde Park. There is a meeting point that's been identified for people to be part of the trade union block, and we'll put details of that in the chat. So another important national demonstration following the massive one of nearly just over a week ago. So we want to keep this work up until there is a full ceasefire, but then to continue the work to seek justice for the Palestinian people and not going back to how things were. So Stop the War's playing an important part in organising that, in putting the message out, in deepening people's understandings of what's going on in that region. And we want to talk tonight about how we can take that into our trade unions and build the days of action, build on the success of last week. So we've got a few speakers to kick off with, people who've been involved in trade union activity in their union, and then we want to open up to hear thoughts, suggestions, questions. If you've got questions about how you deal with particular things as they come up in your workplace, we've got plenty of people who can answer them. Please use the chat to share ideas and thoughts. You don't necessarily have to put your hand up and say anything. The chat's quite useful for that as well. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is a UCU member, but perhaps more importantly for our purposes, the convener of Stop the War Coalition, spoken at the national demos and been part of the organising committees, meeting the police and so on. Welcome, Lindsay German.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex, and thanks to everybody for coming tonight. I know how busy everybody is, and as Alex said, I think we want this to be a practical meeting about what we can do in the next couple of weeks. I just wanted to say a few points in introduction. One is, as people are aware, there's the pause or the exchange of hostages and prisoners, which is taking place supposedly for 4 days from tomorrow. I think it should be clear to all of us that this isn't a ceasefire, that it's a very, very temporary and no doubt welcome, very, very brief respite for the people of Gaza who may be getting some help with humanitarian aid as they desperately need. But I saw a picture on the news tonight of people almost fighting over trying to get a few bottles of water, which were being distributed. And we've all seen these horrific pictures. And of course, it's worth remembering that even if there's a ceasefire, which this is very, very far from being a ceasefire, there's still the siege of Gaza, there's still thousands of prisoners, which never, on the media, you get a great deal about the hostages, but nobody ever talks why there's women and children in prison in their thousands in Israel. We've had 13,000 people dead, including around 6,000 children. I mean, these are really, really horrific figures. And so I think it's obvious to all of us why we can't stop campaigning, and why, for us, we don't have a pause in our campaigning, that we are continuing throughout these next few days to demand a ceasefire, to be demonstrating on Saturday, and to be having our day of action next Wednesday, which is the UN International Day of Palestine. So it's a very good day to choose, where everybody around the world can be doing something around Palestine. And the reason I think it's particularly important for us as trade unionists, so we've seen these massive demonstrations, we've seen absolutely huge demonstrations, we've seen a huge number of local activities as well. We've seen things like occupations of the railway stations and all a whole different set of activities, some of them involving lots of people, some of them involving fewer people, but a sign that there are millions of people in this country who want to show solidarity with Palestinian people, who want at the very least a ceasefire, and a ceasefire is the minimum that we should demand. But I think what's particularly important for us as trade unionists is that if you look at the way our protests are being characterised, there's a whole number of things. You know, we're intimidating to MPs because we dare to hold them to account when they refuse to vote for a ceasefire, or that the marches are hate marches because they're supposedly anti-Semitic, a slur that we obviously completely reject, or that they're violent, or that they're all Muslim marches, and all the things, you know, the sort of the sometimes hidden and sometimes much more open Islamophobia about the marches as well. And I think the crucial thing, it seems to me, for trade unions is that these are, I think, very working class marches. Very large numbers of working class people are concerned about this issue, and quite rightly. But we're not reflecting this enough in terms of organised trade union presence. And this is one of the things we're trying to improve, and we are improving it. We get, you know, as the weeks go on, there are more trade union banners involved. There are more people doing things. If people remember right at the beginning, there were very few trade union general secretaries and people supporting it. Now there's far more, although there are important exceptions to that. And you know, I think it's a real mark of shame, really, for any of the national unions, particularly that have policy on Palestine, to be behaving as they are. But that is true of one or two of them. But it seems to me we've got to kind of try and link this big mobilization to organised working class trade union organisation, but also to link it to the wider questions, you know, that we've heard on the autumn statement today, that many of us have been involved in industrial action over the last year or so, to do with the cost of living and all those sorts of things. I think it's extremely important that we do link those things together. So I think the first thing is the trade union, and I know as well, I know from my own experience and my own UCU branch, so this is a contentious issue in a whole number of trade union branches and with a whole number of people. So I think it's extremely important that we do sort of try and organise ourselves so that firstly we try to win the argument over what is going on in Gaza, but that also we are very publicly present on all the protests, or all the protests that we can manage to do. So really two things. One is the demonstration on Saturday, which will be another very large demonstration in London. We've had a lot of pressure from the police, as we did on Armistice Day, as people will remember, not to have the demonstration or not to go to central London. We've had a lot of this pressure, and we've resisted this pressure, and we will be going to Whitehall, Downing Street, Trafalgar Square from Park Lane. And there is a trade union block, which I think it's extremely important we try and get national banners on, but also that we try to get our own local banners, whether it's regions or local branch banners, or in some way identify, even if it's one that we just kind of paint on a sheet, which we've all done probably at various points over the years. So that is important. And I think, and in the chat, there's the details of where that block is forming up. And I would ask people, insofar as it's possible, to do everything you can to get there. But the other thing is, of course, this day of action on Wednesday. Now, we've had one of those, which we organised with CND, and I think CND will be supporting this one as well, which it wasn't a mass day of action, to be perfectly honest, but it was an incredibly important first step where a whole number of people in different workplaces held up signs and placards, held little meetings, did other activity to get organised, raise money for medical aid for Palestine. And every time you do that, you are raising this political issue. And I think it's so important that we do so. So it's really about saying, what can we do about those two things? And obviously it isn't going to stop after the 29th of November, but those are the two immediate things on the horizon. And also how we can strengthen this trade union network in terms of the immediate questions of Palestine, but also the longer term questions of things like the Ukraine war and our opposition to that, the trade union conferences, which actually aren't that far away when you get past Christmas and start thinking about them, trying to reverse TUC policy, all these kind of questions. We need a much stronger anti-war voice in the trade union movement. So I think tonight, I hope will be a contribution to that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. And just before I pass on to our next speaker, I think the attitude we should take on this day of action is nothing's too big and nothing's too small in your workplace. I say that because I saw today a primary school around the corner from me where my daughter went many years ago. Parents and teachers did a cake sale and were selling cakes outside the school to parents and passers-by, raised £350 for medical aid for Palestine. That's a low-level thing to do, but it's raising the issue. It's getting people talking about the issue whilst raising money. So let a thousand flowers bloom, I say. Our next speaker, Jamie Newell, is from the Fire Brigades Union Executive Council. And all I'll say about Jamie in introduction is he was the only speaker to speak against the GMB motion on Ukraine at conference, which was a very important intervention he made. And it's not an easy thing to do, bizarrely, to argue for peace at a time of war. And he did a great job on that. So please welcome Jamie. If you can.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yep.
So I was asked tonight to talk a little bit about what the Fire Brigades Union's response has been to the situation in Gaza. And I think I'd start probably just by touching on something there that Lindsay mentioned. And that's to say that remember that peace marches have defined generations across our history. I think that's an important thing to hold on to. So the Fire Brigades Union set up a lottery, which was part of our centenary celebrations in 2018, and we used some of the funds from that to support special causes such as the earthquake in Pakistan last year and other relief efforts. So we've donated £10,000 to War and Want Appeal for Safe Palestinian Lives through that, and £15,000 to Medical Aid for Palestine. The Fire Brigades Union Conference delegates over the years have affiliated to the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. And as such, the Executive Council agreed to make a donation to the PSC for the rally that took place on the 11th for around £5,000 to support that rally taking place. And as you heard at the start, I'm not sure if it was mentioned at the start, but we provided the FPU fire engine as a stage for the speakers to speak from. Our General Secretary, Matt Rack, and National Officer, Ricardo La Torre, have both spoken at rallies, denouncing the acts of Hamas and the IDF. And these might seem like small acts, but they are significant acts. I think it needs to be encouraged more widely across our movement that our General Secretaries and our unions get on board with these campaigns. The Fire Brigades Union has a proud history of solidarity with Palestinian firefighters. Indeed, I think I reported to the PSC probably this time last year, actually, that a delegation from Scotland went to Palestine and took equipment, fire engines and other stuff to Palestinian firefighters. And the Fire Brigades Union has a proud tradition of international solidarity. It was one of the first unions to back the campaign to free Nelson Mandela. Ironically, at a time when some newly appointed lords were probably campaigning to have him hung with his party, before then later posing for selfies at his funeral. The FBU has never been afraid to stand up for humanitarian causes and will continue to do so as our membership insists at our conferences. And I guess the question for everyone is, what can we do as trade unionists now? And I'd say like attending a meeting like tonight is probably the first step to that whenever we can. I know that life is something that happens, but every time we come to something like this, I think we should be encouraged to try and bring someone else with us. One thing I have noticed over the years is that if you go to enough of these things, you get to see some regular faces. And I think, you know, one of the onuses on us is to bring those conversations into the workplace. Don't be afraid to talk about these issues in the workplace. It might be uncomfortable, but nothing that was ever worthwhile was easy. Keep the discussion going. And we can't allow the one side of the discussion on this issue to be stamped out, which is what I've seen happen in workplaces, certainly in the fire service. And keep up the pressure on our national union executives and on the wider trade union movement to oppose policies of war and military expansion at home and abroad, as we've seen at the TUC recently. I guess to kind of sum things up and finish off, I'll just probably finish off on the couple of comments that were made on the small acts of defiance for the 29th. So we've got to keep up the pressure on the government, on the opposition, keep it up on social media and on the streets. Everywhere they turn, everywhere, we need them to see us. And every act, however big or small, forms a foundation from which we can build on. Governments tend to rely on our inability to sustain, you know, pressure because life happens and things move on. And what they can't cope with is that philosophy of we won't go home. That's why movements like Occupy scared them. That's why the almost weekly marches and rallies that we've been seeing daily, even in some places, intimidate them because it makes it harder for them to control us. And the more we take our power back, the harder it is for them to oppress us. So we have to keep the pressure on. And I remember Jeremy Corbyn saying that the anti-war movement on Iraq was the foundation from which we managed to turn back and repel the Cameron government's surge and bloodlust to enter Syria. Fighting and the way you fight in some ways is more important than winning because it sets the tone for how frequently they try to come back. The chances of their successes are diminished proportionately to the size of the resistance that they face from us. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Thank you for inviting me. And remember that our job is to fan the flames of anger against injustice and the flames of hope that we can do a better world. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Very wise words there, and nice to hear a firefighter talking about fanning the flames. No, very good. Some important points there about keeping the pressure on and being visible. And obviously one way in which people were visible last week is the workplace photos with people holding up signs saying "Free Palestine, ceasefire now." You know, if they get around on social media, they do make a difference, and they do exactly what JB says. You know, make sure they see us on the day. So our next speaker is Harvey Irving. I hope he's here. I did see him earlier. Yeah, Harvey Irving, who's a Unite rep at St Mungo's, and he's going to talk about some work they've been doing on Palestine solidarity, and hopefully you'll get some ideas from him. Harvey, are you?
He is here. I've asked him to unmute. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can't see you.
Hi guys. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. There you are.
Ah, perfect. Sorry, can you hear me?
Cutting out a bit.
All right. Can you hear me all right? Is that right? Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. I'm a support worker at St Mungo's. Just trying to get a slightly better connection. Sorry, is that slightly better now?
Yeah.
Is that a bit better?
Go on, try again.
Sorry, is that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm a support worker at St Mungo's. St Mungo's is, for those of you who don't know, a homelessness charity, predominantly like London and like sort of the south. I'm a Unite rep at St Mungo's, and yeah, last week we took part in the Workplace Day of Action, and it was really good to sort of a group of us got together and we sort of took pictures sort of us and our colleagues, for those that were kind of in work, and for those who work from home. People found some pretty sort of creative kind of layouts, with sort of like sort of pictures with like signs sort of saying ceasefire now. And we went on to create like a kind of solidarity chat as well, and use that to kind of mobilize people for the demo outside of Parliament that night, demanding a ceasefire. And it was really nice to sort of get we had about sort of 20 of us at that demonstration. It was really good, and it was it was nice to. So I mean, it was really nice to get sort of like 20 or so of us sort of behind kind of like our kind of housing workers sort of banner. But I think it's really important, no matter whilst we work in like we're all housing workers, and the sort of there's obviously industries that are sort of like more or less sort of complicit in the genocide happening in Gaza now. I think super important. A group of sort of just really important to organising your workplaces where you can, like raise awareness, and certainly organise within like our union itself. So Unite had quite a disappointing sort of response in October, and there's been an improvement recently. They've called for a ceasefire, and I'm glad that our housing workers branch as well sort of released kind of an improved statement on Unite's one. But yeah, I think just in response to I think just any sort of Palestinian trade unions calling for sort of support from sort of the international trade union movement, I think just any kind of like we had a lot of members who were just really interested in doing something to sort of show their support. So we went to the march as well on the previous Saturday, and next week we'll be planning to. We're still getting some rough ideas, but we're sort of planning to. Potentially maybe have like a call sort of during the day, just to get people, just to organise sort of like members, perhaps sort of talk about what's going on. Hopefully maybe get some like do a bit of idea sharing in sort of like what we can sort of do to show practical support for Palestinians, and maybe like a movie night just to sort of raise awareness as well. So I think it's just it's really nice sort of way of just sort of getting people together, and raising awareness within our shop. And I would say I think we also had a few members as well go to some of the arms factory blockades, because obviously there's been some fantastic work done by a few different groups. So you've had two sort of arms factory blockades as well. Over the past few weeks, done by like workers for a free Palestine, and I think it was really heartening to sort of have a few sort of members there, with sort of a collective of trade unionists, sort of in a kind of direct kind of response, I guess, to the call by sort of Palestinian trade unions to do sort of whatever we can to kind of show solidarity, including sort of blockading arms factories. And I think super important just to organise, I guess, particularly within Unite, who do represent members in the arms industry, to sort of provide support for any worker who's refusing to aid in sort of like building arms which assist in the Israeli war machine. But that's sort of like basically what we got up to last week. So definitely encourage everyone to take part in the Workplace DOA action. Really nice way to sort of organise together. Definitely agree with Nate Passaran. I think that was one idea that our kind of housing workers branch is doing. And it's just, I think anything just to kind of, I think it's been really nice sort of raise awareness, get together, go to the marches together, and just try and build that solidarity, I guess.
Thanks very much, Harvey. That's brilliant. It's obvious from the contributions already in the chat and the speakers tonight that at grassroots level, this movement is growing. People are doing what they can to engage and deepen people's understanding of what's going on, and anything we're doing in that regard is important. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker, Sean Vanell, who is an executive member of the UCU for Further Education. Hope I got that right this time, Sean, and also a member of the Stop the War Steering Committee. Sean's done some fantastic work in his union and in his workplace on this question, but found time to go kite flying in Primrose Hill or Hampstead Heath, was it, at the weekend, Sean? Kite flying for Palestine? Over to you. Mute, unmute. Okay.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did actually. And the reason why I did it was the palace as a protest. And it was the most moving protest I've seen for many, many years. I didn't expect to be so moved by it, really. There's hundreds of people there flying kites and these lovely kids running around and so on. But you have these two images coming. You've got beautiful kids having so much fun. Then you have the images we're seeing from our television screens of babies being pulled out of rubble in Palestine. That's what Palestinian kids should be doing, flying kites, having fun, not being murdered in their bed. So it was a weird experience, but one was quite moving at the same time. Look, the trade union stuff, I think, just want to reinforce the point. I think what we try and do here through this network has been launched one, as people have been said, the first day of action we tried and had 40 workplaces, but it might be more as well, some we don't know about, who tried to do something about organising from the workplace to try and protest against what's taking in Palestine. Now, the 29th, as has been mentioned, is United Nations Day of Action on Palestine. That makes it very much easier for us to open that door much wider than ever before inside the workplace. And I just want to say very quickly why that is the case. I just want to reinforce the point because I think, you know, the trade unions is about collectivizing that resistance. Lindsay talks about how the very nature of the demonstration being very working class demonstration, and there is, and we have got beginnings of sizable impact with the trade union banners on there, are trying to get that message across. We have power. And that's, I think, what it's all about, isn't it? Working where we as workers have power is in the workplace. The more we can collectivize that resistance around the workplace, the more solid that movement becomes. It's not against the streets, it's very complementary to the streets. We need bigger demonstrations, but we also need to feed it back down and push it deeper into the working class movement. I think one of the arguments, and I've said this before, so apologies if people heard it, what we've been saying here, but I think it does get raised in trade unions, and that is about that some people in our unions say, well, isn't this a diversion from really the economic issues that we face at this moment of time? And I think we have to say absolutely not, because it's quite clear that a trade union movement, a workplace, is only as strong where they're not divided. We all know that if a workplace is full of racist, if it's divided by sexism, by homophobia, transphobia, or anti-Semitism, any of these things, we are faced with a workforce which is not organized, is not unified. It makes it much easier for the employer to drive through their cuts, to drive through their cost-cutting measures, their redundancies, their cuts on our pay, and so on. And of course, the issue of imperialism and imposing bloodshed and war is a central way which our employers and the governments attempt to unite, wrap themselves around the Union Jack to divide our workers against each other. And that's why we think that really trying to drive this issue into the workplaces is something which is so important, that we're not divided and we're united. Last week I was on strike in my college, 3 days on strike over pay and conditions. And on the second day, very strong strike, very solid strike right across the 3 colleges that were part of the group: College of North East London, City Institute College, and Westminster College. But on the second day, we joined up with our colleagues in the NEU at the Sixth Form Centre, and we had a protest outside our workplace over Palestine. And it's amazing. We had 200 people turned up, 100 or so students, 100 or so staff, all chanting "Free Palestine" outside our workplace, and it gave a sense of real confidence to people who were a bit nervous about, particularly in education at the moment with the DFE really trying to make out that if you talk about Palestine and criticize Israel as being in any way you're being anti-Semitic, those arguments are very much around in education. So really give people a boost. I'll find the links of some of the speakers we had there. And we had speakers from the actually NEU, retired NEU member, who's the international officer in the local borough. And he spoke brilliantly as a Jewish colleague and a comrade, brilliantly about his experience, why as a Jew, he's opposed to what's taking place. I think that those kinds of experiences, inviting those kinds of people to speak out so we can set a real unity. And for many of our young people, when they heard a Jewish voice speaking so brilliantly, so passionately about why they're opposed to what's going on, was probably for some of the first time they've ever heard it. And it makes it very difficult, therefore, when others try to paint this ridiculous picture that we're anti-Semitic or anything like this. So that's what we've been trying to do, and I hope we can do a lot more on the 29th. And I have no reason to doubt the experience I've got thus far and tonight's meeting, that clearly we're in a good position to be able to do so. Two last points. One is about reinforcing what Alex talked about then. And that is, we have a battle inside the trade union movement, and it's come up. The GMB leadership been leading it for some time now over the question of climate change, over the question of spending on arms spending, and so on. We need to try and turn that around. And I think we're now in a much better situation through the mass movement that has grown around Palestine, because clearly the employing class and the bosses really did believe that they, and the government, of course, believed that would be another Ukraine. They'll just light up a few buildings and so on and so forth, and dress it up with Israeli flags, and everybody coming running to the cause. And they completely misjudged it. 80% of people realised that and should be a ceasefire. So we're in the majority, and we're having an impact on the government. We're dividing the government, and the great victory, our victory of getting rid of the Home Secretary just recently. So what practically do we want to do? Well, first of all, the trade union bloc. Please do, thanks to everybody who's bought the banners. Brilliant. Let's do that, and more so again, and bring people with you. It wasn't just more banners last time. We had bigger delegations of workers coming along as well as workers. So please bring them along as well. Set up. Well, I noticed today that the transport workers, ASLET and RMT, have got a meeting tomorrow night, calling themselves transport workers for Palestine. Last night, 30 teachers in London met. They can't come to tonight's meeting because they've got a funding rally. They set up called Educators for Palestine. It'd be great to see social workers of Palestine and any other group you work with set those things up. Set up a WhatsApp group to pull together those conversations and those discussions. Hopefully, we can put a link in the chat to ask people to join the Stop the War network. So if you haven't done that yet, please do so. And Lindsay's talked about having a clap for Palestine. I think it'd be a lovely idea, a brilliant idea, that we clap for Palestine on those demonstrations or in those protests outside our workplace. And the final point is this: look, we could do what we can. Yes, we want walkouts, and no doubt there could be walkouts. But if you can't do a walkout, can you get a protest outside your workplace with a photograph? Can you find, if you can't do that, can you find a room inside your workplace whereby you can get a few people together to take a photograph? In my workplace, a lot of people are talking about wearing green on the day to reflect those things. All these things are great. We need something on that day in the workplace to make it clear that this movement is deepening. Yes, it's on the streets and it's got to be bigger, but also it's now spreading into the workplace, and that will frighten them, because they know as well that, as we do, as we have shown in the last year, as the biggest level of industrial struggle for a generation, that we as workers have power in the workplace. And we need to say that not just of conditions, but also over humanitarian issues and international issues like that in Palestine. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Sean. And some important points there Sean's made in ending. These things can start small. Just get a few of you together. If there isn't a Workers for Palestine group in your union or something, just a few of you, and these things can snowball quite quickly. And the importance of being on the block. I'm just trying to find the map, which I'll show you later. But the trade union assembly point is at the corner of Hertford Street and Park Lane. So that's it'll be towards the front of the march, by the Hilton Hotel, towards the bottom of Park Lane. But I'll show you. Oh, there, Maya has put the map in, and Maya has just told me that the trade union conference is the 2nd of March, Saturday, 2nd of March in NEU headquarters. So make a note of that date, because that will be really important to bring trade unionists together, talk about all the international issues that we're working on. Right, our final speaker, I think, is in the room now. Shabir Lakar is an officer of Stop the War, and he has been, if you've been on any of the national demos, you know how good Shabir is at working the crowd and getting the call and response going. But more importantly, what Shabir's been doing in recent weeks is providing support and working with the students who want to raise their voices and use their voices to shout for justice for Palestine. So he's been offering logistical support and advice to them. And last week, you may have seen Shabir on Twitter posting a video of Tower Hamlet students who came out on after the vote in Parliament last week, in their lunchtime, came out from school and marched to Rushnara Ali's office to say, why did you abstain? on that vote. So it's really exciting to see the students out and joining in this mass movement. And I hope Shabir is going to tell us a bit more about that.
Thanks, Alex.
There you are.
Yes, it's been really inspiring to see so many school students just jumping at the opportunity to have their voices heard and to take action in any way that they can. And I mean, it started in Bristol a couple of weeks ago, and then it spread last week. And yeah, and I think you'll have seen the videos from Tower Hamlets and Redbridge and Glasgow, where hundreds of school students were out shouting. And just to give you a little anecdote, that in Tower Hamlets, they managed to get all but one of the schools to actually agree to let the students walk out. And the one school that didn't, the head tried to stop physically by closing the doors from leaving. So the first scale the fence to come out, and they did anyway. So it's really inspiring. We have some more school strikes around the country happening this Friday. I would say the one weakness of it at the moment is that it is mainly being organized and led by parents, so parents of primary and secondary school kids, and there has been some involvement by kind of sixth form students, but not massively and not in a kind of organizing capacity. So that's something we're trying to tip the balance onto, partly because they are young people who have the capacity to lead and organize, and partly as parents of younger kids, they have the roadblock of being told that the child's absence is unauthorized and they might get fined, and that kind of discourages people. So anyway, so that's the kind of move we're making at the moment, or trying to make. We're trying as much as possible to coordinate with university students who've been self-organizing walkouts for a number of weeks now as well. And I was going to see if people here think, I mean, I know there's a kind of day of action planned for the 29th of November. Maybe we could try and coincide that and have the next school strike on the Wednesday as well, and have some kind of joint rallies where people come out at lunchtime and the school students are there as well, and see how possible that is. A couple of favors I wanted to ask people, particularly comrades in the NEU. I know it's difficult for teachers to publicly support something like this, and there's a risk to their job if they do. But I had a brief chat with Daniel Kabede, who said it might be possible to get a statement from the NEU, which at least kind of celebrates the courage of students taking action and says that they shouldn't be sanctioned or whatever. I haven't been able to get a hold of him since. So if any NEU comrades could help push that along and try and help us get a statement, that would be really useful. And secondly, in a number of schools, obviously students are facing repercussions. They are facing, anything from detention to threats of exclusion to being referred to prevent. And I think if we can get some NEU involvement in trying to organize, I know the NEU already has, motions and policy on this. So in helping to defend students and parents on this, I think that will become increasingly important in the weeks to come. But yeah, I just wanted to briefly let people know that this was happening, that it's brilliant, and that I'm in about 50 different WhatsApp groups at the moment of parents kind of trying to organize stuff where they are. And it's really inspiring, and where possible, if we trade union activity and workers walking out, I think that'll be really good. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
No, thanks for that, Shabir, and thanks for all the work you're doing on that. I think Louise is in the room, so she might want to come back. But I do know, even though I'm a retired member, that the issue of prevent is and the way it's being used in schools is very important to the union, and that the union is taking it up. And also, I think the exec meets next week, so I think there will be a statement from that about not disciplining students or so on. So we'll continue working on that. Whilst people are deciding whether they want to, there's some great stuff going on in the chat. So do have a link there, have a look there. People are talking about what's happening. They are posting